Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Salim Badat for Living Islam, and we have our esteemed guests here. We have Sheikh Kamdar and Brother Ibrahim Jadwad, and today we're going to do part 2 of the Ottoman Empire. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum. So I think today let's discuss the downfall of the Ottoman Empire. Okay.
Yeah, that's a long story.
Right.
So we have
let's
time,
go for
inshallah.
it, inshallah.
You see, if you discuss the downfall of the Ottoman Empire, we're looking at about 200 years of history. Because the Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire was about 600 years. The last 200 years was the decline and the downfall. And it wasn't one event. Right? I've identified about 6 factors that caused the Ottomans to go down.
Okay.
Some internal, some external. Right? One of the factors, perhaps one of the strongest factors, was the rise of colonialism. So the British, the French, even the Russians,
The
were all
Italians, yeah.
taking over Muslim lands. In fact, especially the war with the Russians really crippled the Ottoman Empire, because the Balkan areas, back and forth, Ottoman Russian for over like 200 years. They're just taking each other's lands, and that drains their resources. It kills manpower. It stops you from developing because you're in a war all the time. So the war between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, that's one aspect of our history that we don't discuss enough. Most people don't even know there was a war between Russia and the Ottomans, right? But there was the 200 years of war that crippled the empire financially, right? And that was a major factor. At the same time, while that's going on, the British conquer Egypt, the British conquer India, right? The French conquer Algeria and many other lands.
North Africa.
Yes, most of North Africa. So what's happening? The Ottoman Empire is shrinking. Russians are taking over some lands, the British are taking over other lands, the French are taking over other lands. The Muslim Empire is getting smaller and smaller. So this is a major factor that the colonialism didn't just destroy the Ottoman Empire, it destroyed Muslim power as a whole.
Absolutely.
Until 200 to 300 years ago, for over 1,000 years, Muslims were the superpower of this world. You say from the time of the Umayyads until like the last 200 years of the Ottoman Empire, Muslims were a superpower. And they were one of the mighty forces of the world. The colonialism, it crippled the economies. It split the Muslims up into smaller countries. It destroyed the Awqaf system. It destroyed the education system. It started another problem that started at that time because of colonialism also, that weakened the Ottoman Empire, was nationalism. So nationalism is a new thing. If you go back 300, 400 years ago, you didn't have nation states. You had empires.
Sure.
You know, so you had the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, but now you had nationalism start coming a thing. So the Greeks start saying, we want to be our own nation state. We don't want to be part of the Ottoman Empire. And they start rebelling. The Arabs say, we are Arabs, we're not Turks, we want our own state. You know? And then all of these different pockets of communities start rebelling, saying we don't want to be part of this empire, we want our own nation state.
So the Ottoman were facing an outside threat, but also a threat from within, right?
Yeah.
Through nationalism. Okay.
But the nationalism was also fueled by people like Lawrence of Arabia, who told them that you are Turks, you are Arabs, they are Turks, why are you allowing them to rule over you? Let's get rid of them.
What I'm talking about right now is 100 years before that.
Okay.
So he comes in at the end and like,
Sure, but
it's simmering.
Got it.
He comes in, gives the final push,
Correct.
and that's when it explodes.
Correct, yeah.
But if you go back 150 years before that, those conversations are already happening. Why do we have Turks ruling over us? We Arabs. You know, why do we have Turks ruling over us? We are Greek. And these type of conversations were happening from 200 years before that.
See, in Orientalism, Edward Said says that Napoleon went into Egypt with a different mindset, and he went to tell them that why you are allowing the Mamluks to rule over you, I'll give you freedom, and I'll rule according to the Quran. You know, that was his plan.
Yeah.
So it shows that it was easy in that time, but on the whole, I don't think the Ottomans were bad for the Islamic world.
No, the Ottoman Empire at that point in time was, you see, when you look at something historically, it's different than when you're in the moment. For the people alive at that time, they had become disillusioned with their rulers. The finances were being drained with the war in Russia.
Sure.
There were civil wars. The kings were killing their brothers to take over as kings. You know, all these things are going on. So if you're alive at that time, you're going to be disillusioned with your government.
Sure.
We look back historically, we say that was better than what we have today.
Sure.
absolutely.
It's way better than what we have today.
Point. Very important.
But when you're there in that moment, you'll be disillusioned. And you think anything's better than what we have. And now people come from outside with false promises. The Renaissance is happening. That's another factor that affected it, right? The Renaissance, it tilted the power axis. Before the Renaissance, Muslims are the most sophisticated, technologically advanced, developed nation on earth. The Europeans are in the Dark Ages, right? The barbarians. The Renaissance happens, within 200 years, the Europeans are the most advanced nation on earth, and the Muslims are backwards, right? Because what happened was the Renaissance coincided with the decline of the Muslim empire. So one's going down, one's going up. Somewhere along the line, they cross.
So the Renaissance was actually after the Spanish, the Muslim occupation of Spain.
Yeah, it was after that.
So the Muslim occupation of Spain, was it at the time of the Ottomans? No, it was at the time of the Abbasids.
Yeah, it was before the Ottomans.
So the Renaissance took place quite long after the.
Very long after.
Okay.
In fact, the point where basically, if you were alive at that time, you probably wouldn't even know there was such a thing as a Muslim Spain.
Okay.
So there'd been like 400 years after that, and they'd been all wiped off the face of the earth. So it was much later. So many people don't realize the impact this had on the Muslim world, right? That now, you see, before that, what Muslims would do in the olden days is we'd say Islam is the truth. Look at the power Allah has given us. We're the number one nation on earth. We're the most advanced nation on earth. Now you couldn't say that anymore. Now the British and the French can say we're the most powerful people. Secularism works. Nationalism works. Colonialism works. The Renaissance worked. And now the Muslims are looking at that and saying we want that.
Right.
Because they think that works and what we have doesn't work.
Sure.
And they start playing with this. So now in the Muslim world, all these different bubbles start popping up. We have people who want nationalist states. We have people who want secularism. We want people who want what the British have. We have people who want what the French have. And all these pockets start rebelling. And this creates more and more fracturing of the nation state itself, of the empire itself. So these are like just four factors we mentioned. We said the nationalism,
Russia,
the Renaissance, colonialism, and Russia.
Occupation of Muslim lands.
Yeah, the occupation of Muslim lands. Now, a fifth one that pops up at this time is Zionism. Right? So Zionism pops up in about the 1800s. And what the Zionists in the 1800s say is, they realize that they're being persecuted in the Christian lands. So they say, we want Jerusalem and the surrounding areas as our homeland. Who does Jerusalem belong to at that time? Who's the owners?
Ottomans.
The Ottomans. It's the Ottoman territory.
Yeah.
Right? So they start now having negotiations and discussions with the Ottomans demanding that land. And as long as the Ottoman Empire exists, they can't have that land. You see, this is the big thing. As long as the Ottoman Empire exists, Israel cannot exist. So what happened in World War I? The Zionists fund the British army. They provide weapons to the British army. They want no money in return. The only thing they want in return, a promise that if you destroy the Ottoman Empire, you give that land to us. So this played a major role in the downfall of the Ottoman Empire because the Zionists had their eyes set on that land. So they literally funded the opposing side to make sure the empire falls, so that land's no longer part of any empire. And many people don't know about that. And again, we think Zionism started with Israel. No, Israel was what they worked to for like 100 years before that.
Sure. So I mean, so 100 years later, or that time frame, I think at that time frame,
Yeah.
the Balfour Declaration was signed and
Yeah.
taken
After World War I.
After World War I, and communism, the rise of communism at that time.
Around the
also
same
began.
time as well.
1917.
Yeah. So
So all these events take place at the same time. You see, then 100 years ago, we're talking 1910 to 1920, so exactly 100 years ago, the entire world changed. Right? The entire world changes in one go. We have the age of empires come to an end. Right? So we can say World War I was the end of the age of empires.
right.
And that's we can say the sixth factor in the downfall of the Ottomans was World War I. They picked the wrong
Yeah,
side.
picked
They
the
picked the
wrong
losing
side.
side.
Now, what was
Absolutely.
what was the reason for them picking the axis, or the picking Germany? Was
Picking
it
the
because
wrong side.
Was it because Germany didn't occupy Muslim lands? Did they feel that if they backed Germany, hopefully that whatever the British and the French and Allied captured,
If they lost.
Yeah,
would
because
come back.
that was what's going to happen, right?
So they backed.
If they won, they could finally take Egypt and India
All
and everything
back.
back from the British.
Sure.
Sure.
So it was for them, it never made sense to side with the British. Why
Absolutely.
would you side with the people who are conquering Muslim lands?
100%.
So for them, it didn't seem like there was any other option, right? That this is
And they were not given an option to say neutral either, right?
not at that
So-
point.
so
no.
it
Because
was a-
remember, their land's in the middle. In this whole war, the Middle East, as they call it, is in the middle of all these countries.
Or it could have been manipulated that they had to take a side,
Yeah.
to take you know,
You
to
see,
take Palestine.
Salim, Constantinople and its surround had a very special place in Christendom, and you took it. They want it back. So the attempt was made at the time, even before that big repulsion of the combined British and French. So the Dardanelles War, they sent about 20, 30 ships, right, in 1918. Yeah, no, sorry, 2018. And they were
1918,
supposed,
yeah.
and they were supposed to have walk over, but the Turkish army, and as much as we hate Khatatu, the Turkish army repelled the 2018 attack, right, with all their ships.
1918, I think.
Sorry, 1918.
Okay.
Yeah, and they defeated them.
Yeah.
Right. Then came Gallipoli. The Gallipoli, as you know, was a major application. See, the British, the French, they wanted to get back Constantinople. They wanted to get back that territory because that territory was important. After the shrinking of the Roman Empire, that territory became the center of the Eastern Christian Roman Empire, and you took it. So it was a very strategic place to be in. So the First World War, look, from what I understand, the Germans did not occupy Muslim lands.
Is that
At that point, they didn't.
nothing at all? That's
They-
interesting, huh?
And so because they didn't occupy Muslim land, and the Germans somehow over a long period of time had a closer relationship with Muslims and others.
It's actually interesting if you look at most of the academic Muslim works written in like from the 1920s to 1960s, they're written in German.
Absolutely.
Yes, German.
That's
So
Yes.
very
if you want to do
interesting.
academic Islamic work today, you actually
Sure.
need to study German to access many
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
books.
So
Personality, as Hababu mentioned, personality of Atatürk. Can you tell us about him?
I won't have anything good to say.
Yeah, no, then
No,
say
Mike.
it. I have nothing good to say about it.
Look, you know, we said people were looking to the West,
Yeah.
and they said we want what they have.
He
We
was
want this
them.
secularism. We want this freedom. We want this modern state. He was the guy who brought that to the Muslim world. So on one hand, he kept Turkey from being occupied by the British,
that's the key.
right? And
That's
he
the
made
key.
it a Turkish republic.
Right.
On the other hand, he didn't make it an Islamic republic. He made it a
Absolutely.
secular republic.
Sure.
And he destroyed Islam in Turkey to
Correct.
such an extent that until 10 years ago, we never considered Turkey a place to move to. It's only in the past 10 years that the whole thing has
Absolutely.
shifted back in favor of
Absolutely.
Islam.
But
But for like 90 years,
Yeah.
Turkey was the most secular and un-Islamic of all the Muslim
you
lands.
see,
True.
there's a point of view, Salib, that it touched the urban people, but not the rural people. And the majority of the Turks are in rural areas. So Istanbul and Izmir and some of these places where they force Muslims, even a grocery shop must sell alcohol and so forth, right? Remove the fez, remove the scarf, remove and
Because
and
of
the
Arabic.
Arabic,
Yeah.
made it into Roman. The Turkish language was in Arabic, made into Roman script. So all of this contributed to the idea. What he wanted to fast track, right? Falsely fast track Turkey. The thing that happened was that the majority of the Turks were not in these urban areas.
Yeah.
See, no matter what you do to, and I'm saying this, no matter what you do to Zuma, the Zulus love him.
Yeah.
They'll do anything for him, right? So in a sense, the Turk loved Islam. If you speak to Turk, and I have some Turkish, they say in the DNA of the Turk, the fellow who says I don't believe in God, don't say he's not a Muslim. He'll kill you. It's synonymous with being Muslim, right? So when the election, and I'm just telling
Yeah.
you with respect, right? Professor Najmuddin Erbakan, he was professor of mechanical engineering in Germany, and he came back. He was part of the wider Islamic Renaissance and all that, right? Influenced by Ikhwan and others. But he came back from Germany and he established the Salamat Party, right? Nobody gave him a chance in hell. This is 1974, and we were his guest in 1976. When he put the party on this thing, they won 52% of the vote. and 25% of the vote was a Sufi order that didn't vote for him. Can you imagine? The guy sitting in a way, 25%.
What's a Sufi order? Gula.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Gula.
Yeah.
Gula.
What I'm saying is that the Sufi order, right, and his Salamat Party was also part of a greater Sufi order, right? But those people said, no, keep Islam out of governance. So they didn't vote for him. In other words, he would have had a bigger majority. So people don't realize that for the Turk, from what I'm told, to be a Turk means to be a Muslim. Very
You see,
strong.
one of the discussions that needs to be had after World War I, and we still haven't had it yet, is how does the Ummah move forward with building a nation that is at the same time modern and Islamic.
Right.
You see, we have this problem
Sure.
that we think we have to be modern
Sure,
or
sure,
Islamic.
sure.
So like Turkey went the way of modern, Saudi Arabia went the way of Islamic. If you look at example to have someone who found a balance, look at Malaysia.
Right.
Right, they embraced all the good of modernity, the technology, the cleanliness, the buildings, the environmentalism.
Singapore too.
Yes, Singapore as well. But I'm talking about Muslim countries, right?
Yeah.
So just to give an example of a Muslim country. At
Yeah.
the same time, Malaysia embraced all the good of modernity, but at the same time, they didn't abandon Islam in any way. Wherever you go,
Sure.
there's masjids, there's scarves, there's Islamic centers, there's madrasas.
And
The
they are
average
committed
person
to
prays
Islam.
5 times a day. You know, when you go to Malaysia, the taxi driver will stop and say Salat time. Let's go pray
Yeah.
Salat." You know, that's the culture.
Yeah.
They found that balance. To replicate that on a global scale, that's something that's another thing that's needed, and this is something the Ottomans were working on before World War I. Was what does a Khilafat look like in the 21st century? For them, it was what does it look like in the 20th century? They were reforming the entire system
Correct.
to work for the new
Correct.
world, because the Khilafat is not a stagnant model. The Khilafat system of the Umayyads was different from the Abbasids. The Abbasids were different from the Ottomans.
Yeah.
The Ottomans realized about 300 years ago. They realized we need to make some changes
Yeah.
so that we can work in a modern world.
Yeah.
Right? That never happened. We need to have the discussions now. Everyone's saying we need Khilafat, but then you get people like ISIS, and we don't want their Khilafat.
Sure.
That doesn't sound anything like what we studied. So
So where do you think now? Where does this conversation need to start? And
it needs to start with the academics, with the
Right.
Muslim scholars and ulama who specialize in this field. The problem is we don't have much specialists in this field anymore, right? There's actually a field of study that most of us don't even know about in South Africa called siyasa.
Okay.
Siyasa means
Politics,
Islamic governments, right? And siyasa is the study of how do you rule by Islam. It's not as simple as following a fiqh book. A fiqh book is not how you rule a country,
Correct.
right? For example,
Practicality.
if you look at people who have this narrow understanding of fiqh, they'll say silly things like, "Oh, in Islam there's no such thing as a driver's license." They say silly things like that. No, that's not fiqh. That's siyasa. That's a government rule that a government is allowed to make in Islam. A Muslim government has the right to restrict who can drive, to have licenses for driving, to have penalties for driving. All that falls under siyasa. Yeah, they have the right to do that in our Sharia. But because we think, if it's not mentioned in the fiqh book, then it's not part of Islam. The idea of passports and visas, they have the right to implement that. Our religion doesn't restrict all that. But because we don't study these
I
subjects,
never knew that was an issue in its.
it is. I
crazy.
met people who say things like,
But no identity cards,
Yeah.
photographs.
they say all of this is kafir things. All of this was invented by the kuffar.
Do you think that Turkey is moving towards the ideal you're talking about?
Turkey is, but Turkey is facing a critical problem at the moment, in that the community is divided. There are those who want to be Islamic, and those who want to stay Ataturk's way. And I'm worried about the clash happening between those two sides.
But from what I can understand, each time there was an election,
Yeah.
even the opposition party that won the mayorship or whatever it is of Istanbul,
Yeah.
he's in the opposition, but he's Islamic.
Yeah. But you also have to
He's
remember
very-
the
he's very
interference from the
Islamic,
outside.
eh?
You
Okay.
have to remember the interference from the outside.
Sure.
When the Muslim Brotherhood finally won in Egypt,
Yeah.
what happened?
They chucked him out.
And they tried to do that to Turkey as well.
Yeah. No, they
They
tried
tried.
it many times.
But Turkey, right now on the ground, the average Turkish person wants Islam back.
Yes.
And that's why it failed. When they
Yeah.
tried to do the coup in
Sure.
Turkey, it failed.
What is Turkey's
Sure.
role in this political landscape, especially around that area? with with Afghanistan around it, with the Middle East, being what
Supporting
it is,
Qatar, for example.
supporting Qatar against this.
So being part
So
of Iran.
what's its stance at the moment? The geopolitical stance of Turkey at the moment? Is it?
I can't really comment on that,
Yeah.
but Turkey is a very important location
Yeah.
because where it stands, if Turkey had to grow into a proper Islamic power again, overnight it could fix Syria and Palestine's problems.
Oh.
Because they're right next to it and they used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. And those lands were lands of complete peace for Muslim, Jews, and Christians throughout the Ottoman era. So only after the Ottoman Empire fell that all this carnage started.
What about? I think a point that's very relevant and very important to discuss. Maybe it's not discussed enough. Is the Saudis and their role in the in
Yeah. So this is the
destruction of
controversial
the
one.
Ottoman. Yeah.
This is the controversial point. Like,
Mm.
when you talk about this, there's two sides that get very angry. You get the side that have raised the Saudis to like a level where you can't criticize them, and you have the side that demonize them to the level where you can't say anything good about them. We try to be historically balanced and just present
Right.
the facts without
Right.
being on either side.
Sure.
So what happened was, in the 1700s, there was a Hanbali scholar in Najd by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab.
Right.
And he formed an alliance with a tribal chief named Muhammad ibn Saud. So they formed an alliance, and that alliance stated that they're going to rule that area.
Was this alliance put together by the British?
No.
Okay,
not-
independent of that.
No. You see, there is some confessions of a British spy type books.
Okay.
Those are fabricated.
Okay.
Honestly, if you
No, but there was no value to Saudi
remember,
Arabia.
you have to understand the landscape at that
no
time.
Oil, no, not that,
Understand the landscape at that time. Najd at that time was perhaps one of the most backwards, forgotten parts of the
backward.
Ottoman Empire.
I think-
Even the Ottomans didn't pay any attention
Sure,
to it.
no,
It was
no
like a
worries.
backland.
Sheikh,
Everyone's living in small tribes.
I'm going to take you out of, but you need to go back. Okay, I think finish this.
Yeah, right. So we have
Yeah.
these tribes living in. So if you Najd at that time is all tribes. So you have different towns. Each town is their own tribe, and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he starts preaching his message, his understanding of Islam. In his understanding of Islam, the Ottomans and the Sufis are all, outside. He says they're committing shirk, they're committing bid'ah. You have to fight them. You have to take them down. Not his exact words, but that's the message he preached, and his sons preach and his grandsons preach. And what that did is it led to a back and forth war between the Saudis and the Ottomans over the next 200 years. So they form an alliance where if they take over any lands, the Ibn Saud family will rule the land and the Ibn Abdul Wahhab family will handle the Islamic side. Right till today, descendant of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is the king of Saudi Arabia, and the descendant of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is
They rule.
the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia.
They
Right
rule.
till today. The alliance is still there, right till today.
Hassan Ali Sheikh, yeah.
Right? So they form this alliance. After Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab dies, his son takes over as the chief scholar there. And during that time, the Saudis conquer Makkah and Medina, and they form the first Saudi state. A lot of people don't know this. There's actually been 3 Saudi states. Saudi Arabia is the third one. So in the 1700s, they formed the first Saudi state. Actually, the early 1800s, right? They take over Makkah and Medina. They now stop allowing people to come for Hajj if they are Shia or they are Sufi or anything
At
like
that time.
Yes.
Right.
So we're talking in the 1800s now. Suddenly, if you're a Sufi or you're Shia, you can't go for Hajj.
Right.
Right? So the Ottomans, they start fighting back. They send, I think his name was Ali Pasha, right? He was the governor of Egypt at that time. He goes in with the army, and
So was it during Ottoman rule?
Yes.
But the Saudis were they were stopping people from coming for Hajj.
Yes.
So they had the authority to
They
do
took
that.
over the lands. Like I
took
said,
over
what they
land.
did
Okay.
is they were taking over town by town in Arabia,
Correct.
and from those towns they took over Makkah and Medina.
Okay.
So first the Ottomans, they thought, oh, these are just some tribal fights happening.
Yeah.
So only when they took over Makkah and Medina, the Ottomans said, wait, hold on, what's going on here? These guys took over the Holy Lands,
Took them
and
to-
they're not letting our people come for
Yeah.
for
Hajj.
Umrah now. So that's only when they stepped up and they sent one of the governors to fight them, right? So this governor Ali Pasha, he leads the army, and for like 10 years, the back and forth war between the Ottomans and the Saudis for Makkah and Medina. Eventually, the Ottomans win. They take back Makkah and Medina. They reopen the borders. They take the leaders of the Saudi family and the Ibn Abdul Wahhab family to Egypt, have them executed in public, right? But some of them manage to escape, and they go to Riyadh, and they start rebuilding in Riyadh. 40 years later, they pop up again, and they start taking over the lands again, and the second Saudi state is formed. And now there's another back and forth war for another 40 years between the Ottomans and the Saudis. And finally, the Ottomans defeat them again, and they go into hiding again. The third time they pop up, World War I. The British need allies within the Muslim world
Sure.
to help them take down the Ottomans.
Sure.
And now we have 200 years of vendettas between this tribe and the Ottomans. So immediately they agree to help the British. And they help the British, they take down the Ottomans from the inside. They are promised that land, they are gifted that land by the British. Arabia was gifted to the Saudi family by the British. And it becomes the only country in the world named after a family, the Saudi Arabia. So they played a very instrumental role in the downfall of the Khilafat.
So it's quite obvious, what the role of the Saudis and what transpired. So why would you, what reason would you think that some Muslim scholars would be very anti those who speak against the Saudis? What do you think? What is the reason for that?
So what happened was in the 1990s, some Saudi scholars started speaking against the government, right? Most specifically, Sheikh Salman al-Auda, may Allah free him. And this,
Is he alive?
he's still alive. He's still in prison
Where?
in Saudi Arabia.
Where is he?
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
He's
but-
in prison.
He's in prison.
Okay.
Yes, right.
Auda.
Yes, Sheikh Salman al-Auda, right. So he and some of his colleagues, they start speaking against the government. To counteract this, the government starts supporting certain scholars who start pushing a narrative. That narrative is, it is haram to speak against the ruler.
Correct.
Funny thing is, that narrative didn't exist when the Saudis are fighting the Ottomans.
Absolutely.
Haram to speak against the Ottomans or to fight the Ottomans. But now that the Saudis are in charge, suddenly it's haram to speak against the ruler. Right? So this becomes the new narrative. And they start pushing this narrative across the globe. Right till today, you go to London and you try speaking against Saudi. You'll see a British guy will stand up and say it's haram to speak against the ruler. It's not your ruler, you're living in London. But they've pushed this agenda so much that some people have been brainwashed into thinking that if you speak against Saudis, you are committing a major sin. You must just keep quiet.
You see, another thing I must tell you, Salim, I mentioned to you, my dear mother, may Allah bless her, we were busy with things, and from time to time, the criticism of what the Saudis were doing, and I'm talking about in the 60s, 70s and 80s, right? My mother would say, Qawmi Muhammad. Don't say nothing about the Qawmi Muhammad. The family of the Prophet, the nation of Muhammad.
Arabs, yeah.
The
Don't
Arabs.
say anything
So
against them.
that's another one.
That's another one that you see.
About don't
that-
speak against the Arabs, right?
Yes.
No, against the Qawmi Muhammad.
No, but others say also,
Specifically-
they speak of Arabs too. Generally, don't speak because the Prophet was an Arab.
When they're
So
talking
that's
about
another
Arabs, they're
narrative.
talking about Saudis. Yeah, remember that.
But
Not
yes, the funny
Jordanian,
thing
not
is the
Egyptian.
Saudis are not Qawmi Muhammad. The Hashimis.
No, of course. But I'm just saying,
Yeah, but-
in a simplistic way,
Yeah, I know
in
what you're
her
saying.
mind, she said, don't say bad about the Qawmi
You
Muhammad.
see, we have these ideas that we mustn't speak about certain people or certain things. And again, from every community has different reasons why.
Yeah.
But today, politically, this is an agenda being pushed. You'll actually see books in bookshops all over the world, right? Published in Saudi Arabia. The ruling about speaking against the ruler.
Yeah,
we're quoting
sure.
Quran and Hadith saying why it's haram to speak against the
Sure.
ruler.
You see the famous Quranic verse that they say, Atiullah, Atiur Rasul, wa ulul minkum, that obey Allah, obey the Prophet, and those in charge of you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Those who are rulers. Therefore,
Obey them.
obey them.
I think, Sheikh, we've covered everything. What do you think? Is there anything else just to...
I mean, moving, I would really...
so by losing the Ottoman Empire, what have we lost?
lost everything. We lost everything.
We lost everything.
You know, when I talk to Muslims around the world today, there's this defeatist mindset.
Sure.
There's this negative energy. There's this waiting for the Mahdi. There's this idea that we were once great. And this is the trauma of being in a post-Khilafat era that the Ummah is dealing with. We haven't figured out a solution yet. People ask me, how do we restore the Khilafat? I say, I don't know. Nobody knows.
No, but
There have
this
been
is-
many efforts to.
Sheikh, maybe
nothing worked.
I think we've lost the Khilafat, and maybe now it's another agenda that we should push. Instead of the Khilafat, maybe independent states or
No,
independent.
you see, the Khilafat can work within that as well. You see, this is not the first time we lost the Khilafat.
Okay.
The Mongol invasion. After
Lost
the
it completely.
for 100 years there was no Khalifa. Right before the Ottomans rose up, after the Mongols took over Baghdad, until the Ottomans rolled up, for the next 100 years the Muslims were divided into small states. The
Right.
Mamluks, the Safavids, the Seljuks, they all were their own rulers.
Right.
It took a while for a new Khilafat to come
Inshallah.
up.
Inshallah.
So we 100 years after this time, inshallah,
Yeah.
history will repeat itself.
Inshallah.
But what I'm saying is what we need to do now is the conversation has to start.
Yes.
intellectuals have to get together. They have to discuss, how do we move forward? What would a Khilafat look like in the 21st century? How would it operate? So that one example or one proposed model these days is, we don't do away with the nation states. We have the nation states, but we have someone that they all answer to. That will be the Khalifa. So the nation states can't massacre their people. They can't fight each other.
And that's the problem.
They can't unite with the non-Muslims against the Muslims.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why we don't have that one
we need
leader.
someone like that.
Correct.
You need one leader who has an awe of authority that the whole
Sheikh,
Muslim world respects.
now this is what I think. This is cutting it down to this. You cannot have a Khilafat. You cannot have that one ruler, because to be a ruler, you need to control Makkah and Medina.
Yeah.
The ruler doesn't need a visa for Makkah and Medina. He needs to control Makkah and Medina.
And remember this, even the Ottomans didn't call themselves Khalifas until they took over Makkah and Medina.
Exactly. So the thing is, as long as the Saudis are sitting there, they are the greatest obstacle. And we know the Saudis are backed by America, Britain, everybody else. The Saudis, as long as they are sitting there, we're not going to have that leader, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You see, in Muhammad Assad's book, Road to Mecca, and I recommend that we should all read it to understand what we are and who we are today.
Road to Mecca is a book I've read at least once a year, every year, and everybody I meet, I tell them read this book. You must read that book.
And in that book, Muhammad Assad comes back from Libya, and he tells Saud, our brother there is a life and death struggle. Life and death struggle. He wants our help. Open a corridor for him so that he can get our help. Arms, this, that, whatever, right? What do you think King's answer is? You read it? I'm only interested in my kursi. That's all. Tell the Sanusi, come here, I have a nice villa for him.
Yeah.
I have a nice villa, forget about your fighting. Then the second time when the Khilafah ends, again Muhammad Assad goes to him and tells him, look, first time after a long time we don't have a Khilafah, assume the role of a Khalifa until we can resolve the issue, right? You have the holy places in your hands. Again, the Saud says, I'm only interested in my kursi, nothing else. And that's why for a very, very long time until now, they are working on the idea that they are the Khadim al-Haramain. That's all. The
keepers of the
two holy places. That's all.
You also have to remember that the Saudis played a critical role in the downfall of the Khilafat.
Of course.
At that time,
Of course.
their army were under the assumption that they were establishing a Khilafat. The armies of the Saudis were under the assumption that they are taking the Khilafat away from the Turks towards the Arabs.
Yeah.
Then you know what the Saudis did?
That's interesting.
They massacred their own army overnight. They massacred to make sure that the army doesn't rebel against them. They massacred that army.
Serious.
Yes, there was an army.
Who wanted
They were
Khilafat.
called the Ikhwan. They were called the Ikhwan.
Yeah.
Not the Ikhwan we know today.
No, but
a
Ikhwan,
separate
yeah,
Ikhwan,
yeah.
right? There was this army in Najd called the Ikhwan, who were very loyal to the Saudis, and they fought for the Saudis in World War I under the assumption that the Saudis are going to take over this land. They're going to take over the next land, the next land, the next land. They're going to establish a Khilafat. They're going to bring the entire Muslim world under one ruler. The Saudis, once they had their land and they made their promise to the British that they're not conquering any more lands, the next thing they did is they called in the other army to massacre this army. Because they knew this army would rebel against him as soon as they realized what's going on.
The treacherous people.
What about that? Talk about Najd. I wanted to ask you this. What is the authenticity of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ speaks of Najd, two horns? The horns of Shaitan comes out of Najd.
You see, these hadiths about the future and the Day of Judgment, they're very vague.
Okay.
And we don't really know what they mean until they happen.
Okay.
And sometimes we think they're referring to something, but they could refer to something else. I'll give you the example, the hadith saying that Yajud and Majud will come from the east and they'll break a wall and they'll have a certain look. When the Mongols came, people thought it was Yajud and Majud.
Yeah, sure.
Now
sure.
we look back 600 years, they were wrong.
Imran
and
Hussein.
the Western world is the Ajud Majud.
Yeah.
I think I have a own theory. But
Imran Hussein says that the Western world is
exactly. So
Allah
people
Ta'ala
have
knows.
different
Sure.
understandings, right? So
Sure.
same thing with this hadith about the horns of the devil will rise from Najd.
Two horns, yeah.
So some people will say, it's the Saudis.
The Saudis,
And some
yeah.
people say, no, it's something else. Maybe it's another event 200 years time that he's referring to. We don't know. That's ilmul ghaib.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see, like when again, doing work and busy with it, in our own little way, Islamic work and all. My mother said, leave all that, man. The Mahdi is coming. Why you worry so? The Mahdi is coming, he'll sort it all
I
out.
actually like Ahmad Didat's response.
Eh?
Ahmad Didat
Really?
used to tell them, Mahdi is coming, at least build him a chair.
Exactly. And that is also the way they and I think the conversation also happens in South Africa, right? Like, don't worry about this. The Mahdi comes in, he'll sort everything out.
This is the defeatist attitude.
Absolutely.
This is a defeatist
Defeatist
attitude.
attitude.
If Ertugrul and them had this attitude, they wouldn't have been an Ottoman Empire. They
Sure.
would have said the Mongols are here, let's wait for Mahdi.
Exactly.
They didn't. They picked up the pace and they picked up the pieces
100%.
and rebuilt. And that's what the Ummah needs to do today. Somewhere in the Muslim world, the rebuilding has to start.
Inshallah.
You see, the thing that strikes me very strongly, for the first time in human history, we are sitting here and the whole world can hear us. We are sitting here and the whole world is your neighborhood. Well, the world has shrunk to the size of a golf ball. Now, if we are going to take the issue of Islam, I think our job should be to make Islam known. Forget about the consequences. Just do the da'wah, right? And the da'wah is what the Quran says, invite people to the way of your Lord, right? But also, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا أُمَّةٌ وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. Just be a witness. Just be a witness. The Prophet is fretting that the Saudis, the Arabs are not accepting. Allah says, no, you do your job, Hidayah will come from me. So our job should be to just become the Prophet. I just need to confirm it. I have come for one thing, to perfect the human conduct. Right? Now, if we make that our objective, not Khilafat, that the whole world is affected by us. Look, in New Zealand, the most respected people today are the Muslims because of what happened. And the reaction was very nice. And the president or prime minister was so sympathetic, right? And even when people that present an image, for example, everybody wants to be a Muhammad Salah.
Yeah.
Right? Who is he? Muhammad Salah, right? He's a soccer player. Or Hashim Amla, when he goes to Australia and they went for him, that terrorist has come and terrorist has come. So when the news media asked him, what do you think? I think when they get to know me, maybe they'll have a different point of view. They'll have a different opinion. The whole of Australia and New Zealand loved him. And he's become. So we have to continue with one thing only. Just be.
But I think
eh?
absolutely, I agree with you. But I think also the conversation needs to start with the ulama, with the elders.
You see, this is another interesting point of our history, right? After the Khilafat fell, every group latched onto a different idea on how to revive Islam.
Sure.
Okay.
So the Salafi said we go back to Quran and Sunnah. The Tabligh Jamaat said we start praying 5 times a day, get everyone back in the masjid. The Ikhwanul Muslimin said we need to use democracy to establish an Islamic state. Everyone came up with different ideas and they all had the same sincere intention. We're trying to revive Islam. If you ask a Salafi, a Tabligh Jamaat member, Ikhwanul Muslimin member, you ask any of them what you are doing, they all sincerely believe they are trying to revive Islam. But everyone's taken different paths to do so. Now if we all can unite and share our ideas and pool our ideas, maybe we could find something in the middle that can work.
You see the problem as you speak of, like now you're saying of Ikhwan and Tabligh, two completely contrasting attitudes.
Yeah.
One believes that politics is no part of the religion and they keep away from any political discourse. Other one believes politics is part of our religion. So now we need to find a common ground. Going to be very difficult.
It is difficult, but also you have to understand the history.
Sure.
So for example, the Tabligh Jamaat is born from trauma. The British, when the British first colonized India, it was the Deobandi ulama who stood up to fight them.
Yes.
Shah Ismail Shahid, he led the jihad against the British. And he and his students were massacred. That's why we call him Shah Ismail Shahid.
Right.
So when he and his students were massacred, that created a trauma within their movement that made them apolitical.
Got it.
So there's a trauma there that they need to move past and say, okay, that was 300 years ago. Maybe we can be political now without the same thing happening.
Yeah.
It's a different time, a different place.
Sure.
So we have to understand where people come from. We have to understand their histories.
So as
they
you
have
said,
a reason for believing
as you
what
said,
they
it's
believe.
about meeting common ground between all the different
You see, the
visions.
entire universe now, the whole world, is one village.
Right.
Right. Everything you do and you say touches another human being. So we have to see Islam in that way. As you allude to it all the time in your khutbah, but just be a witness, right? Shuhada ala nas wa yakunu rasul alayk. That's the Prophet is a witness to you. You be a witness.
Absolutely.
Not asking you for anything else.
Absolutely.
Not telling you to go, as you were saying, go and distribute pamphlets and that's fine. But just be a good Muslim.
Yeah.
Right. And the Prophet ﷺ said, when the companions asked, well, we got nothing to give, can you smile? Smile? You're smiling is your charity. If 1.4 billion Muslims smile, we can make 500 million more.
Absolutely.
Yes, I believe everybody has a different role to play.
Right.
Right. So, for the average person, just being a good Muslim in the 21st century is a challenge itself.
Sure.
And it's a dawah itself. Some are more eloquent at speech, they're going to be involved in public speaking. Some are good teachers, they're going to be working in our education system. Some are good at politics, they'll be reviving Islam politically. Allah has given every person different strengths.
Just be the best you can.
Yes, you use your strengths to serve
Yeah,
the deen.
and
That's it.
absolutely.
Use your strengths to serve the deen. If Allah has gifted you with intelligence, use that intelligence to try and solve the problems of the ummah.
Absolutely. Jazakallah, Sheikh. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, mashallah.
Jazakallah.
But we need to have a further discussion.
Inshallah.
Anytime.
Unanswered questions.
Jazakallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa
Thank you.
rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.